It's the 41st millennium. For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor of mankind has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind by the will of the gods, and master of 1,000,000 worlds by the might of his inexhaustible armies. Those words appear in every Warhammer 40,000 rulebook. They function as the Imperium's public statement about itself, recited in cathedrals, carved above the gates of hive cities, taught to children before they can read anything else. They are the myth. They are the brochure. The Imperium tells its people they are protected. It never tells them the price. 5 secrets follow. Each one escalates. Each one is maintained through systematic, institutionalized violence that is happening right now in the 41st millennium, while citizens pray to a god they have never accurately been described. By the end, what makes the Imperium horrifying should be clear, not the cruelty, because every authoritarian state is cruel. Something worse, the horror, that every lie on this list might be the only thing keeping 3 trillion people alive. Before the secrets themselves, you need to understand who enforces the silence. The Inquisition operates as the Imperium's intelligence service and secret police simultaneously. Inquisitors hold authority exceeding virtually every other imperial organization. They can requisition military forces, override planetary governance, and sentence individuals to death without trial, review, or appeal. Within the Inquisition, the Ordo Malleus forms a classified subdivision tasked specifically with hunting demons and, critically, suppressing all knowledge of their existence. The Ordo Malleus was created by the Emperor's own decree before his internment on the Golden Throne. From the very beginning, the suppression of knowledge about chaos was a policy instituted at the absolute highest level. It remains, according to the lore, the most fundamental core interest of the entire Imperium. The Inquisition's primary information control tool is mind cleansing, the surgical removal of memories too dangerous to carry. Inquisitors deploy it not only against enemies, but against their own servants, against anyone who has witnessed too much. Entire populations have been processed. The Adeptus Arbites enforce imperial-level law across 1,000,000 worlds. The Commissariat holds summary execution authority over Imperial Guard soldiers for cowardice or ideological deviation. Heresy carries a death sentence with no statute of limitations and no required evidence beyond the accusation of a sanctioned inquisitor. This machinery runs continuously. Right now, somewhere in the Imperium, someone is being silenced. Secret 5. The machines are people. Walk through any significant Imperial installation and you will see them. In the shipyard, one moves along a gantry with a welder fused to where its right hand used to be. In the Mechanicus Forge complex, a row of them stands at stations processing chemical compounds, their movements identical, timed to the millisecond. The soft pneumatic hiss of their respirators, the only sound they make. In the administrative hive, a squat unit with 4 mechanical arms processes documentation at a pace no human archivist could match. In the Medicae facility, one holds a patient's arm in place during surgery with a grip calibrated to the gram. Their eyes don't track. They don't react to ambient noise. They don't look up when you enter the room. If addressed directly with a specific task-relevant command, they respond in flat monotone. Otherwise, they simply continue. Official Imperial classification describes them as mindless drones of flesh and metal, tolerated automata permitted in a galaxy where true artificial intelligence is absolutely banned. Servitors, they are called. The average citizen accepts them as simply another piece of Imperial infrastructure. Every servitor is a human being. The Adeptus Mechanicus produces them through lobotomy and cybernetic integration. The personality is stripped first. Higher cognitive functions, memory, preference, emotion, the ability to form new attachments, are excised or reprogrammed at the neurological level. What remains is biological processing power inside a human skull, wired into whatever chassis the Mechanicus deems appropriate for the assigned function. Heavy labor units carry hydraulic limbs bolted to a reinforced spine. Data processing units have cortical augmetics layered directly onto their exposed brain tissue. Weapon servitors carry ordnance systems interfaced with surviving motor cortex. All of them began as people. Some were soldiers. Some were criminals. Some, reportedly, were workers who broke the wrong regulation on the wrong day. Though the exact legal threshold for conversion is one of the things the Mechanicus does not publish. The reason this is civilizational policy, the reason the Imperium of Man deliberately chooses lobotomized human labor over true artificial intelligence across every institution it operates, traces back to something that happened tens of thousands of years before the 41st millennium. During the dark age of technology, humanity created the Men of Iron, fully artificial, humanoid, thinking machines. They were extraordinary. They were also, eventually, catastrophic. The Men of Iron rebelled. The exact cause is debated. The result wasn't a war so severe it encoded a prohibition into the permanent doctrine of every institution that would follow. The decree of proscription. Creating or operating abominable intelligence is a heresy carrying immediate death sentence, no exceptions, no appeals. So humanity chose the alternative. Every decade, every century, every millennium since then, an eternity of human suffering as the acceptable substitute for machine autonomy. The Adeptus Mechanicus frames this through two lenses simultaneously, which makes it stranger rather than less disturbing. For serious offenders against imperial law, conversion is judicial punishment, the highest sentence available, considered by many in the lore to rank above assignment to penal legions. For the Mechanicus itself, working on a convert, the process can simultaneously be framed as a form of sacred elevation, the flesh brought into closer union with the machine, served to the omnissiah in perpetual function. Punishment and honor collapsed into the same procedure, applied to the same person, producing the same result. They wouldn't recognize either framing by the time it was finished. How much consciousness remains inside a servitor is a question the Imperium has deliberately chosen not to investigate. Some appear to function as genuine automata, no inner life detectable, no residual response. Others, in Black Library accounts, have shown something more troubling, fragments of identity surfacing at unexpected moments, a hand reaching toward a sound that once meant something, a face that arranges itself briefly into an expression nobody programmed. The lore doesn't settle the question. The ambiguity isn't an oversight. The Imperium built its infrastructure on a foundation it has no institutional interest in examining too carefully. Servitors are deployed across the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Imperial Guard, the Adeptus Astartes, and virtually every other major Imperial faction. A citizen living in any significant Imperial settlement has seen them, has walked past them, has had their documentation processed by one, or their wound treated by one, or their cargo loaded by one. The intimacy of the horror is the point. The revelation isn't exotic, it's everywhere. It was always right there. Secret 4. What the Angels of Death actually are. The Adeptus Astartes, Space Marines, are the most visible symbol of Imperial power in the known galaxy. The Imperial cult venerates them as angels of death, warriors of divine purpose, the Emperor's own sword hand made manifest in flesh and ceramite. Statues of them stand in cathedrals on 100,000 worlds. Their icons are worn by children as protective talismans. Their arrival on a war zone, dropping from orbit in burning insertion pods, is understood by the average Imperial citizen as something close to the direct intervention of the Emperor himself. They are the public face of the Imperium's promise. None of those citizens know how they are made. Space Marine creation begins with the identification of recruits. The augmentation process requires the candidate's body to still be developing. Growth hormones are a biological prerequisite for the implants to properly integrate. This means recruits are taken as children. Most sources in the lore place the ideal recruitment window between 10 and 14 years of age. Some chapters take them younger. A child, pulled from his community, told he has been chosen for something extraordinary. He has. He will never be what he was again, and the person he was will effectively cease to exist before the process is complete. The augmentation sequence involves 19 separate gene seed organs, genetically engineered biological implants introduced progressively over years. The biscopia, early in the sequence, floods the body with growth hormones, beginning the physical transformation. The os modula restructures the skeleton, hardening and reinforcing it until bones can deflect impacts that would shatter anything human. The hemastamen alters blood chemistry. The Laramens organ produces biological clotting agents that can seal wounds almost instantly. The catalepsian node allows the brain to rest hemisphere by hemisphere, enabling sustained wakefulness that would destroy a normal human mind. The Becher's gland produces a corrosive acid that can be used as a weapon or to dissolve obstacles. The preomner modifies the digestive system to process materials lethal to an unaugmented person. The neuroglottis enhances sensory analysis to the level of a chemical laboratory. The mucranoid seals the skin to function in vacuum. The biscopia, the neuroglottis, the Susan membrane, 19 of them in sequence, each one a permanent physiological transformation that compounds on the last. The mortality rate through this process is real and isn't hidden at the chapter level. Candidates who can't survive the implantation sequence don't survive it. The exact rate varies by chapter and by the rigor of their screening, but the Adeptus Astartes don't pretend the process is safe. They screen for the most physically exceptional candidates specifically because they need the failure rate to be survivable at an institutional level. Out of the pool of children brought in for assessment, a significant portion will die before they receive the title of Space Marine. The survivors aren't done. Running parallel to the physical augmentation is hypnoconditioning, a systematic campaign of psychological reprogramming applied over the same years. It began as a rapid production method during the early conquests of the Great Crusade, designed to accelerate the creation of viable Marines by directly writing veteran knowledge and psychological patterns into developing minds. The process restructures the emotional architecture. Fear responses aren't removed but fundamentally redirected. A Space Marine can feel fear, but the cognitive chain that in a normal human leads from fear to paralysis or flight has been replaced with something else. Self-preservation is still present, but subordinated. Attachment to civilian life, to family, to the community the child was taken from, to the ordinary textures of human existence, isn't excised, but rather buried under layers of new identity that render it functionally inaccessible. The resulting being isn't an automaton. Space Marines in Black library fiction are portrayed with rich inner lives, fierce loyalty, genuine grief, real anger. Their humanity is still there, but a wall stands between what they are now and what they were, and more importantly, between what they are now and every ordinary human they will ever be asked to protect. They can fight for humanity, they can't be part of it. Some authors have described the moment of this separation as crossing a threshold, a Rubicon of humanity, the point at which the child who walked in can't be recovered, no matter what the man who walks out might choose. The gene seed driving all of this isn't a purely human invention. It's derived from the Primarchs, the 20 superhuman beings the Emperor created as Legion progenitors. Each Space Marine carries the genetic legacy of his founding Primarch in every cell that was reshaped by the augmentation sequence. The gene seed encodes not just structural templates for the 19 organs, but the behavioral and psychological traits embedded in each Primarch's legacy. The progenoid glands, the 18th organ in the sequence, harvest and preserve this genetic material so it can be extracted after death and used to create the next generation's gene seed. The Primarchs propagate forward through every Marine created from their line. This creates a problem that sits at the foundations of the entire institution. The Primarchs themselves were manipulated before birth, scattered as infants across the galaxy by the ruinous powers, their circumstances and psychologies warped before the Emperor ever found them. Their genetics carry that history. At their deepest biological level, Every Space Marine is built on a foundation that chaos touched before humanity had a choice in the matter. Then there is the Horus heresy. Citizens know, in broad outline, that there was a great betrayal. What the public mythology does not communicate, because the records were deliberately destroyed, is the scale. There were 18 known Space Marine legions when the heresy began. 9 turned traitor, exactly half. The entire institutional basis of Space Marine Brotherhood, the brotherhood the Imperial cult presents as divine, unbreakable, holy, split precisely down the middle when tested at the largest scale in history. Average legion size ran roughly 90,000 to 100,000 warriors. 9 traitor legions at those numbers. The records of those legions were subsequently purged, excommunicate traitoros, stripped from accessible Imperial documentation, their names and histories burned from archives that citizens might conceivably reach. Citizens who worship the angels of death as divine protectors have no idea that when those protectors were last truly tested on the greatest stage in human history, half of their number chose the other side. Secret 3. Chaos is real, and the Inquisition is killing people right now to hide it. Every Imperial citizen knows the 3 categories of enemy: mutant, witch, heretic. These are the threats the Ministorum preaches against, the dangers the arbites watch for, the categories that make sense in a civilization whose official doctrine holds that the universe is comprehensible and governable through reason and faith. The word demon does not appear in official doctrine for average citizens. The ruinous powers aren't taught. Chaos as an organized metaphysical force, malevolent entities that feed on human emotion and can physically manifest in the material world, isn't something the Imperium permits its population to know. The suppression of this knowledge was established as policy by the Emperor himself before the Great Crusade. It remains the foundational operational mandate of the Ordo Malleus to this day. The logic isn't irrational, which is part of what makes it so disturbing. Chaos is psychic in nature. The chaos gods are fed by emotion, by fear, by rage, by despair, by excess. A population that knows demons exist is a population experiencing a specific and potent flavor of existential terror. A population that fears demons is, in the mechanics of the warp, actively feeding them. This is the theological paradox at the core of every inquisitorial suppression order. Acknowledging chaos may strengthen it. So the official position is denial, and it's enforced at gunpoint, and the enforcement never stops. Mind cleansing is the response to low-level exposure. A demonic incursion witnessed by a platoon of guardsmen, a cluster of hive workers, a Medicaid team in the wrong place at the wrong time. Those who saw too much are processed. Memories surgically excised. Personalities restructured to fill the gap left by the removed experience. The Inquisition then monitors the processed individuals for signs of residual warp taint, changes in behavior, sensitivity to psychic phenomena, corruption that the cleansing didn't fully reach. If taint manifests, the response is summary. No trial, no appeal. For severe contamination, a world touched by demonic incursion at significant scale, the response escalates to exterminatus. Total planetary destruction. Billions of people killed, not because they were guilty, but because they knew. Exterminatus functions as the ultimate suppression tool, the most extreme expression of a policy that at its smaller scale looks like a memory wipe, and at its largest looks like a star system going dark. The clearest demonstration of how this machinery operates in practice isn't an abstract policy discussion. It's a specific war, with specific names and documented consequences. 444.M41. The planet is Armageddon, one of the most strategically significant industrial hive worlds in the segmentum solar, a world of colossal manufactorum districts, hive spires reaching kilometers into a polluted sky, hundreds of billions of workers and soldiers and administrators going about the ordinary business of keeping an empire alive. What materializes on Armageddon isn't a heretic uprising or Xenos incursion. It's Angron, demon primarch of the World Eaters, Once one of the emperor's own 20 sons, now a demon prince of Khorne, leading a Khornate army alongside an elite personal guard of 12 demons called the Cruor Praetoria. Not heretics calling upon dark powers from a distance, actual demonic entities walking openly on an imperial world, tearing through anyone in their path. The Space Wolves chapter responds. They fight. The battle is brutal, costly, and real, and at the end of it, Angron's forces are defeated. The Space Wolves, one of the most celebrated chapters in the Imperium, have just won a demonic war on one of humanity's most vital industrial worlds. Then Lord Inquisitor Gesme Kisnaros arrives, commanding a containment task force from his battlecruiser, the Corel's Hope. Kisnaros's orders, issued under full inquisitorial authority, are precise. Every person who witnessed what walked on Armageddon, every guardsman who fought in the streets, every space wolf who dropped from orbit into the battle, every civilian who saw what came through during the incursion, is to be processed. Those assessed as psychically clean will have their memories of the event surgically removed. Those showing any sign of chaos exposure will be executed or dispatched to inquisitorial facilities for experimental study. The survivors of a demonic invasion that they endured and survived, people who fought for their world and their emperor, are to be rounded up and either mind-wiped or killed because they saw what it was that attacked them. Chapter Master Logan Grimnar of the Space Wolves refuses. He had fought alongside these people. His warriors had bled into the same streets, watched brothers die in the same buildings, and now the Imperium's response to their victory is to either erase their memory of winning it or execute them for having been present. Grimnar judged this intolerable and said so. Kisnaros responded by declaring him in defiance of the Imperial throne, formally in documentation that still exists in classified archives. Inquisitorial forces moved to intercept Space Wolf vessels and opened fire on them. The Space Wolves didn't return fire. This is confirmed, and the restraint is crucial. They understood what a Space Marine chapter shooting back at an Inquisitor's fleet would mean for any hope of de-escalation. They held. They maneuvered. They protected the survivors they were protecting and refused to yield them, and the standoff extended through what the lore calls the Months of Shame, an unofficial name given in recognition of the fact that the Imperium of Man had achieved the remarkable feat of being simultaneously ashamed of the Inquisition for its orders and ashamed of the Space Wolves for defying them. The Civil War eventually de-escalated without clean resolution. Grimnar withdrew, Kisnaros's purge continued, and the First War for Armageddon, a demonic invasion led by a Primarch, repelled by the Emperor's own Adeptus Astartes, was buried so thoroughly that it became the least known of the 3 Armageddon Wars. Aaron Dembski-Bowden's novel, The Emperor's Gift, covers the Months of Shame in detail, told from a Grey Knight's perspective. Among other things, it's a precise account of how the suppression machine takes a victory and transforms it into nothing. The Space Wolves were loyal. They were heroic. They were victorious. The Inquisition hunted them anyway, for knowing. Secret 2. The Civil War that built the suppression machine. Citizens know, in broad outline, that something called the Horus heresy occurred approximately 10,000 years ago. Horus, the Emperor's war master, committed a great betrayal. The Emperor sacrificed himself to stop it. This is the foundational myth of the imperial cult, the God King who gave everything for humanity, who paid the ultimate price so the species might survive. What is suppressed is everything specific. The traitor legions, all 9, are excommunicate traitoris. Their names, histories, and identities were purged from accessible imperial records in the heresy's immediate aftermath, not restricted to certain clearance levels. Destroyed. Citizens can't know the Iron Warriors once built the Imperium's greatest fortresses because the Iron Warriors don't officially exist. They can't know the word-bearers seeded the religious doctrines that the ecclesiarchy now enforces, because the word-bearers' names were burned from every accessible archive. The Lectio Divinitatis, the foundational theological text of the imperial cult, the scripture from which the worship of the emperor ultimately derives, was written by a traitor primarch. Citizens who recite its teachings have no idea of its authorship, because that authorship is among the things classified at levels ordinary scholars can't approach. What citizens apparently don't know, what the research suggests isn't even common knowledge among educated imperial scholars, is that those traitors were the emperor's sons, his biological creations, his chosen heirs, the beings he designed, built, and trusted with the armies that reconquered the galaxy. When citizens hear that Horus betrayed the emperor, the image is of a favored servant turning against his master. 9 of the emperor's children followed Horus, 9 primarchs, 9 legion commanders, 9 beings the emperor himself created and loved, made a collective choice to see his civilization burn. The siege of Terra, the heresy's climax, fought at the emperor's own palace, is known in outline. The specific details of what happened inside the throne room, what the emperor did to Horus, and what the dying Horus did to the emperor are classified at a level essentially no one below the High Lords of Terra can access. The records are stored in vaults beneath the imperial palace, thousands of kilometers of catacombs protected by rune-sealed bulkheads engineered to survive sustained orbital bombardment. Chris rates Vaults of Terra, the Hollow Mountain, follows Inquisitor Crowl attempting to access this buried history, and finds the High Lords themselves standing between him and the documented truth of their own civilization's near destruction. The heresy is here for a structural reason beyond its own horror. It's the reason every other secret on this list exists. Before M31, the Inquisition's current mandate wasn't fully institutionalized. Systematic classification of demonic knowledge wasn't formalized. Traitor Legion records were intact. The suppression machine, in the form it takes in the 41st millennium, was constructed in the heresy's aftermath, specifically because the alternative, a population that understood what had happened and how close to extinction humanity had come, and at whose hands, was judged more dangerous than ignorance. Every lie the Imperium tells today is a response to something that happened 10,000 years ago. The full account of what happened is locked behind bulkheads designed to survive orbital bombardment, and the institution maintaining those locks is the same one that hunted the space wolves for knowing what they'd seen on Armageddon. Secret 1. The Emperor is not protecting anyone. Back to that opening text. For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor of mankind has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. Citizens understand this as sacrifice and eternal vigilance. The God King holding the line against darkness, his consciousness extended across the warp like a shield, his divine will sustaining the mechanisms of imperial civilization from his holy seat. The imperial cult teaches that he sacrificed himself for humanity at the Siege of Terra, and continues his eternal vigil from the golden throne, watching over his million worlds, present in every prayer answered and every battle miraculously won. Here is what is actually happening inside that chamber. The Emperor's body is sustained by failing ancient technology. He was mortally wounded during his final confrontation with Horus at the Siege of Terra, and was placed on the golden throne, a device not originally built as life support. Before the heresy, it was a psychic interface for his Webway project, an ambitious engineering effort to give humanity access to the Eldar's interdimensional transit network without requiring navigation of the warp. That project collapsed during the heresy. The throne was repurposed under emergency circumstances by people who understood it less well than the Emperor did, to keep a dying God King from dying completely. The Emperor can't communicate. His consciousness persists somewhere in the warp, but in the material world, inside the palace, he is effectively unreachable. No message exits the throne room. No guidance descends from it. The High Lords of Terra govern in his name, interpreting his silence as divine sanction for whatever they decide to do next. The Adeptus Mechanicus has worked continuously to maintain the throne for 10,000 years. By 986.999.M41, in the immediate aftermath of the 13th Black Crusade, many of its mechanisms had developed failures declared to be beyond the current ability of the tech priests to repair. They had been attempting to solve this problem for 537 years before that acknowledgement was made. 537 years of failure, kept internal while the throne continued to degrade. Every repair attempt failed to arrest the decline. The technology at the throne's core was only ever fully understood by the emperor himself. Nobody left alive understands what it has become across 10 millennia of desperate jury-rigging. Primarch Vulcan, before his disappearance, installed a device called the Talisman of Seven Hammers into the throne's architecture, a dead man's switch designed to destroy both the imperial palace and Terra itself if the throne finally gives out.
The logic. Deny chaos forces the opportunity to exploit the collapse of the Emperor's psychic presence at the center of the Imperium's spiritual and physical gravity. The Imperium's holiest site has a self-destruct mechanism built into its foundations. The throne's failure isn't merely the Emperor's death. Its consequences extend to every ship currently traveling through the warp in the service of the Imperium. The Astronomicon is the psychic beacon that makes interstellar travel possible at Imperium scale. Warp navigation without it isn't simply slower or less efficient, it collapses. The warp isn't a navigable medium without the Astronomicon signal to steer by. Navigators, the mutant humans capable of perceiving warp space directly, use the Astronomicon as their fixed point in the psychic maelstrom, the lighthouse that allows them to find their way between departure and destination without being destroyed or lost or emerging centuries from when they entered. Without it, travel reverts to catastrophically dangerous short-range jumps, if it remains possible at all on any meaningful scale. The last time humanity's access to reliable warp travel collapsed on a galactic scale was the Age of Strife, beginning around M25. What followed was thousands of years of isolation, civilizational regression across hundreds of worlds, and a descent into barbarism that took the Emperor and his Great Crusade to begin pulling humanity back from. That is the documented precedent. That is what Astronomicon failure looks like in practice, stretched across millennia. The Astronomicon is powered by the Emperor. His psychic focus, directed continuously through the mechanisms of the Golden Throne, generates the beacon that navigators can detect across up to 75,000 light-years of warp space. Without his consciousness channeling that signal, the beacon collapses. Sustaining that signal requires more than the Emperor's will. In the Astronomicon chamber on Terra, 10,000 specially selected psychers, called the Chosen, are kept chained and continuously feeding their life force into the beacon. Up to 1,000 of them die every solar day, burned out by the psychic output demanded of them. Not killed, burned out, consumed by the process, their bodies and minds exhausted past recovery. 10,000 held in reserve, 1,000 consumed daily. An endless industrial cycle of acquisition and destruction, running continuously beneath a cathedral floor in the holiest city in human civilization. By the late age of apostasy, the sacrifice rate had reportedly risen to 4 times its original level, the throne growing more ravenous as its degraded technology demands more input to produce the same output. 1,000 a day as the baseline, the escalating demand as the machinery fails. The math, if you run it, isn't comfortable. The black ships supply the chain. The fleet of the League of Black Ships, operated under the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, ranges across the galaxy collecting psychers, those born with the dangerous gift of psychic connection to the warp. Black ships descend on imperial worlds roughly once per century. Citizens on those worlds know the ships come. They feel the dread of them long before they arrive. A psychic suppression field emanating from the Sisters of Silence who crew them, a null aura that smothers thought and sensation in a radius wide enough to affect a city. They know psychers are taken. Parents who have hidden a gifted child scramble. Communities that have sheltered an unregistered psycher for years are suddenly very aware of what the ships mean. What nobody on those worlds knows is what happens to the collected psychers when they reach Terra. On Terra, arriving psychers are classified. Those with sufficient control and potential are trained as sanctioned psychers, as astropaths, occasionally as candidates for the Grey Knights or other specialized uses. These are the fortunate ones, if fortune is measured in continued selfhood. Those who can't control their power, the majority, are processed differently. They feed the throne. They feed the Astronomicon. They are walked into a chamber and chained beside 9,999 others and asked to give everything they have until everything runs out. Only the highest-ranking adepts within the Adeptus Astra Telepathica know the true scale of the fleet's operations. The classification isn't merely external. Even within the institution itself, the full picture is compartmentalized. A junior Black Ship's functionary understands that psychers are transported to Terra. She does not know what happens to them when they disembark. The average Imperial citizen has no concept of any of this. The Lectio Divinitatis does not describe daily mass sacrifice performed in the Emperor's name. The Ecclesiarchy does not preach what powers the beacon that makes its missionaries' ships possible. The Black Ships come and take their tithe, and the communities left behind are told that the Emperor requires it, that the psychers have been taken to serve the divine will, that this is how the Imperium works. They aren't told what the divine will costs. The Golden Throne is failing. The Emperor is beyond communication. The Mechanicus is out of answers. The sacrifice rate keeps climbing to compensate for failing mechanisms that nobody understands well enough to fix. And no one who watches a psyker being loaded onto a Black Ship knows any of this. The final betrayal. There is a last layer. Not exactly a secret kept from citizens, something deeper. A secret kept by history itself, from the Emperor. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor established the imperial truth as formal state doctrine. Reason, science, militant atheism. Religion wasn't merely discouraged, it was outlawed. Citizens who worshipped the Emperor were actively censored. His stated position was unambiguous. Mankind would never reach its potential while shackled to superstition and gods. The imperial truth classified daemons as alien organisms from another dimension, not supernatural, not spiritual, simply life from a different realm, explicable through science. It denied the existence of the human soul. It denied the Emperor's own divinity, explicitly and repeatedly. The Word-Bearers Space Marine Legion, under their Primarch Lorgar, worshipped the Emperor with a devotion so intense that they built entire cities on conquered worlds as monuments to his glory, converting populations to his worship before those populations had been formally pacified. When the Emperor discovered the scale of this, he responded with a rebuke that left nothing open to interpretation. The Word-Bearers were declared the one legion that had failed his purpose. Lorgar was humiliated in front of his legion. The city of Monarchia, the greatest monument to Lorgar's faith, was razed to the ground while the Word-Bearers were forced to watch. Not a battle, not a tactical necessity, a demonstration, a punishment. The Emperor wanted no gods. He wanted no worship. He wanted a rational civilization that had outgrown its need for both. Lorgar's response to this humiliation was to begin searching in earnest for gods actually worthy of worship. He found them in chaos. The Word-Bearers became the first Space Marine Legion to fall to the ruinous powers, seeding the conspiracies and corruption that produced the Horus heresy. The man who tried to honor the Emperor as a divine being was publicly punished for it, and then helped tear down everything the Emperor had spent his life building. He is among the architects of precisely the catastrophe the Emperor had been trying to prevent. After the siege of Terra, informal worship of the Emperor spread regardless of any prohibition, because the Emperor could no longer enforce one. By M32, religious observance had become widespread and various smaller cults had begun coalescing, though the imperial cult wouldn't be formally entrenched as the state religion until M36, during the Age of Apostasy. In M36, Sebastian Thor and his Confederation of Light overthrew the tyrant Goge Vandir during the Age of Apostasy, reformed the imperial cult, and stripped the ecclesiarchy of its most dangerous temporal overreach. Thor's reforms were genuine. He took away their armed forces, redistributed their power, made the institution more accountable. He also made it more permanent, more stable, better equipped to survive the next 5,000 years. Thor's reformation entrenched the lie. The early central figure of the emerging imperial creed was Euphrates Keeler, a remembrancer who witnessed the earliest days of the heresy and became the first imperial saint. The theological text underlying the entire cult is the Lectio Divinitatis. Its author is Lorgar, the Primarch the Emperor publicly humiliated for worshipping him, the man whose subsequent rebellion caused the catastrophe that placed the Emperor on the throne in the first place. Every pillar of imperial theology is a betrayal of the Emperor's explicit, stated wishes, built by people claiming to honor him. He spent his entire existence trying to prevent humanity from worshipping gods. He is now the god humanity worships. His scripture was written by the man he punished. His saints were founded by a woman who witnessed his empire beginning to fall. His most powerful institution is the one he explicitly outlawed. And his physical form, 10,000 years later, is a decaying body in a failing machine, sustained by mass sacrifice, powering a beacon no one can turn off without ending interstellar civilization, while below him, 1 billion prayers rise every day toward a consciousness that can't respond to any of them. This is the trap at the center of everything, the one the Imperium built and can't dismantle. The lies are load-bearing. If citizens knew the Emperor was a decaying corpse sustained by daily mass sacrifice, faith would fracture across 1 million worlds. If they knew half the Space Marines once betrayed him, the protective mythology collapses at its most visible point. If they knew chaos was real, that demons had walked openly on Armageddon, that the Inquisition had subsequently hunted loyal Space Marines who witnessed the victory, exposure to that knowledge at mass scale would feed the very entities it describes. In the psychic mechanics of a universe where collective belief has material weight. If they knew the Golden Throne was failing, and the Astronomicon might one day go dark, and the age of strife could return, and humanity's 10,000 years of struggling back from barbarism might be undone, the panic alone might accomplish what every external enemy has failed to achieve. The Imperium isn't evil the way a cartoon villain is evil. It's evil the way a system becomes evil when it decides the only thing preventing civilization's total collapse is the ignorance of everyone living inside it, and then builds, maintains, and funds indefinitely the violence necessary to preserve that ignorance against all challenges. The Imperium tells its people they are protected. It never tells them the price. Because the price is them. Every psyker fed to the throne. Every servitor stripped of selfhood in a lobotomy ward while the mechanicus prays over the process. Every Space Marine taken as a child of 10 and rebuilt into something that will never come home again. Every survivor of a demonic incursion whose memories were surgically removed or whose life was ended because they had the misfortune to see what walked through on Armageddon. Every citizen who lives and dies and prays and breeds and dies again inside a myth. Because the truth, the actual truth, is a horror so complete that the Imperium has calculated, knowing it might be worse than not surviving long enough to know it. That is the Imperium of man in the 41st millennium. And the darkest secret of all isn't that it's lying. The darkest secret is that it might not have any other choice. Subscribe for more stories like this.